This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stock Box interview. The Market Musings podcast with Fairbairn and Russell. Hello and welcome to the Market Musings podcast, where today we have a guest in the financial literacy, education space and ethical investing. It's a first for us on this podcast. Uma Sulman, the General Manager of Wahed UK, who are offering digital financial services to retail customers globally, starting with ethical wealth management. So Uma, you're very welcome to the Market Musings podcast. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me on.
No, it's very good to be talking to you. I'm looking forward to this. And of course, I'm joined by Kenny as well. And I believe you two, but perhaps meet in person soon. You have a destination you're both heading for.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, it's great to have you on, Uma. When you come up to Scotland next week is bring some warm clothing. Yeah, winter has definitely arrived early here. It's about wet and miserable today. So yeah, don't
not keep me warm.
Well, it depends if you've maybe got some vodka in it or something like that. that might help you. But no, it's great to have you on, and obviously we'll get to COP26 later in the podcast. But I mean, Mark covered quite a lot of sort of topics in the intro there, but I think before we sort of take a deep dive into them, it would be great just to get a bit about yourself, your background, where you're from, what got you into finance, and just a bit about your business journey, really.
All right, I'll do it very, very briefly. So I studied economics and management at university, wanted to always have a career in finance. Started my career off working for the local authority. So I worked in the public sector within finance. That gave me a really good understanding of public spending and how, the difference between one department being in budget or out of budget could be down to a single, for example, child who needs extra facilities at home, and that completely blows the budget. So that gave me a good understanding around, I guess, finance with a soft edge. I then went on to work for Ernst & Young. I was in auditing for a long time. And I've had a career in banking ever since, primarily in the risk and digital space. So what I mean by that, risk and technology. So I've had very senior risk roles, and I saw the future of finance pivoting into the tech side. So I moved more into kind of the digital frontier with regards to the roles that I had and managing risk around them. So qualified in postgrad from the Manchester Business School in governance, risk and compliance. So I guess I've always had a cautious approach to how I do things. Alongside my day job, so to speak, I've been involved in Islamic finance for a number of years, kind of helping build the industry, working alongside, I guess, industry bodies, UN, for example, which is where I guess the crossroads are with COP26, in other spaces, also advising the government, for example, around issues like student loans and equality of financial access. A bit of a varied background, but quite firmly in the finance space.
Okay. You said you used to manage high risk investments, is that right?
No, I didn't manage high risk investments. I worked within the risk team, so I headed up risk.
Okay.
Across different departments.
Okay. Kind of like an actuary, that kind of role. Would that be the best way?
This was more about operational risk. This is how we manage risk. So this cut across everything. So from investment risk, from market risk, from how we manage our operations, where we are going concern, from consumer risk, from credit risk. So operational risk cuts across all of that, making sure that we're managing what we do properly to protect the consumer ultimately.
Okay. So protecting the consumer, I understand that is a lot of what Wahed are about, and it's about ethical investing and also educating people in financial, elements, financial literacy, in terms of taking on debt, and there's sort of education information that's around that. So before what led you up towards Wahed then? I mean, you mentioned there about protecting the consumer. Was that where you naturally found yourself gravitating to?
Yeah. So look, there is when we talk about protecting the consumer, there's one in terms of mis-selling, the wrong products going to them, and so on and so forth. But I think there's also a philosophical discussion around protecting the consumer about the types of products that are available. One thing is ensuring that a shoddy product is delivered well, and the other is raising questions about there being shoddy products in the market. And so, for example, I'll just give you one example. You can have a product that charges very high interest, and it's still a legitimate product. And as long as you explain it to the consumer and all of these types of things, they understand the contract they're going into. And you can say, well, actually, the consumer is protected because you explained it to them. There's another bit where you actually say, well, actually, this product in itself is detrimental to society. And I guess that's where I've pivoted from the first type into the second type, and talking more about the philosophical elements of protecting consumers. And that's where the ethical angle comes into with Wahed.
Okay. And how did you get into Wahed then?
So through Wahed, like I said, I was involved in Islamic finance for a number of years, and there's a huge overlap between Islamic and ethical finance. I think it might be interesting for some of the viewers, because when you say Islamic finance or Sharia compliant, people may not know quite what it means, or may have preconceptions about it. At its most basic, Islamic finance essentially only calls for a few things. One is the prohibition of interest, something which is shared at least with the Abrahamic faiths from a scriptural perspective, that you shouldn't charge interest or pay into a system that facilitates interest. The other is that there should be real economic activity in terms of any transactions that you enter into, that there's a real service or an asset which underpins that transaction, which actually is quite a significant point, because it's always talking about growing the economy from a real perspective. The only other 2 points is within Islamic finance is that there should be a controlled amount of risk. It's something called gharar, which means that, if something is too risky where both parties don't really know what they're transacting in, as strange as that sounds, they shouldn't enter into that contract. And the reality is, in today's age, there's so many contracts like this that people don't really know what they're exchanging or what the two counter values are. So it says that you shouldn't, be involved in those types of transactions. And the last one really is that you shouldn't be involved in any type of speculation or gambling in the transactions that you have. As well as this, the only other thing is that the types of industries that you invest in or transact with shouldn't be ones that have a social detriment. So it shouldn't have any social detriment. Okay. So things like gambling, pornography, arms, animal testing, these type of things. And it's just a screen. It's just a screen that filters out those types of companies.
Okay. So that is Islamic investing or Sharia investing, which I'd never heard of, and that's fascinating, really, that there are these laws there but they make an awful lot of sense. So really, it's not doing anything that is detrimental to society, not profiteering off someone else's need. I mean, these are all quite good core values to have anyway, as any normal, any human being.
And fairly universal.
Yeah, fairly universal indeed. Yeah, but. So the company Wahed, then, you're not just targeting people who want to do Islamic investing, are you? Though you're open to everyone.
Absolutely. I mean, that was kind of the trigger point for the company being set up. But as we said, these principles are very much universal. Whatever the individual founder's motivation for creating something, the value or the principles of the products and the markets we serve is universal from that point of view, and it's for everyone. So it is ethical in nature, purely because of the fact that we don't invest in those types of companies. And also, this is a big thing, we can't invest in companies that have more than 33% debt. So by nature, these companies are more sustainable. They're able to take care of any kind of funding requirements. that they're not leveraged so high that suddenly if there's a call for their money that they can't make it. So these companies are sustainable by nature, and so it just helps in terms of the ecosystem. Then if more companies behave like this, there's more of a long-term approach to productivity, as opposed to kind of a get in and get out quickly and make money on the way.
Yeah, and okay, and Wahead's been about, I think, was it 4 or 5 years ago it was formed, Umar?
That's correct. Out of the US, is formed about 5 years ago. We have an ETF, a listed fund on the Nasdaq, and from that we're now in the UK, Malaysia, it's gone into Nigeria, South Africa, the CIS region, which is Russia and the Caucasus. We're going into Indonesia, look at the Middle East, the Indian subcontinent. It's phenomenal because there's such a need and demand for having products, and it's actually financial inclusion. It's democratizing the access to financial products in a manner that's aligned to people's values. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess people now are making choices where they put their money. And
absolutely.
Obviously, COP26 is high on the agenda at the moment, and it's you can't turn on the TV or the radio or go onto the internet without a story about COP26. So I think it's raised awareness of what is out there and what's available. So I mean, you've explained the investment strategy. So how do you target investors? I mean, do they come to you? Do you do road shows, or is it, how do you get your?
I guess it's a bit of both. I mean, we definitely have lots of people who are looking for ethical investing or halal investing, if that's an angle from which they're approaching it. But we also, I mean, we've done a lot of online marketing, digital marketing. We do road shows. We try and educate people, and the financial literacy angle is huge in this because often the people most in need of advice around finances are those that don't have access to it or don't have an understanding around it. So they're the ones who are taken advantage of. I think it's fundamentally corrupt that someone who has less money has to pay much more in financing than somebody who is wealthy enough to pay a lot less. There's something wrong with that,
There's
surely.
something very wrong. You see it all the time, don't you? That if you've got a lower credit rating, you get the less attractive interest rates, which is bizarre because it's more likely you're not going to be able to make those payments. But also, as soon as you start taking on debt, then suddenly you get offers everywhere as well to take on more debt. It's
thrown at you.
Exactly. It's like take this credit. It's it's a crazy world out there, really, and I think there's a heck of a lot of debt, not just at government level, but on personal level as well. And financial education, financial literacy, it's not taught in the schools. I mean, I remember the only bit of financial teaching I had in the school was how to write a check, which wasn't even that relevant back then, and it's hardly relevant today. But everything that I've either learned from my dad, how my parents handled money, which was always in a very good way, and just my own self-teaching, self-taught things. But it's so important, and of course we've got the rise of this buy now, pay later. That's everywhere now. You've got car finance, people buying cars that they really shouldn't be able to afford, but it's so tempting and made out to be so easy, and really end up getting into a situation where it can become incredibly, emotionally hard on them, and of course impact their daily lives, and unable to pay it back or unable to save for something significant like a house perhaps, and it really starts to weigh on your shoulders. But is that something that you at Wahead as well want to help with, so as well as doing the actual ethical investing and giving people hopefully a return with investing in sustainable and ethical projects? Are you also trying to educate people as well and help people in that sense?
Yeah, completely. Funny enough, I was on another podcast earlier on today advising that's aimed at females, at women, because if you look at the statistics, they save a lot more than men, but they are much less likely to have that money invested. So just even, I mean, there's community that doesn't really have perhaps the same level of financial literacy. So we're on a mission to educate people around simple things like, what's an asset, what's what's debt, how does inflation work, what's taxation, just so people start to understand some of these things. And you're absolutely right. Even when I went to school, we weren't taught any of these kind of real practical lessons. And same way, I was always taught by my father, save now, buy later, which is completely different to buy now, pay later. and it's shocking actually, because they're targeting younger and younger people. And an item that you can afford. So they say even if something's like, argument's sake, £20, you can pay it now, but because you suddenly see that pop up, spread it over 4 payments, buy now, pay later, you can buy more. You're kind of, it's just feeding, I guess, greed. That's the only word to say is greed and materialism. I guess these are quite big words, but I don't understand what other way to describe it. It's instant gratification.
Definitely instant gratification, definitely, particularly with young people, I think, as well. That is a problem. But that's also a problem with how information is available, I think. Everything is at your fingertips.
Absolutely. And this is what I worry about, because all of these things are then interconnected. Before, you may have seen something that you really wanted, but you weren't able to get it. Now, you see something you like, and not only do you see something you like, you see via social media, everyone's kind of showing, and I mean, social media it's a whole nother discussion, but people are pretending to live a life that they don't really have. But it's just all fueling this. And then suddenly you have mechanisms for buying some of this stuff, getting yourself in debt. It just sounds like, look, money's being thrown at people who don't really understand debt. And one day it's going to catch up.
One day it is going to catch up, and whether it's a catastrophe for the world or whether it's unfortunately the individual that hurts the most, it remains to be seen. But at some point, yes, the chickens will have to come home.
And I suppose, obviously, I mean, you guys are into fintech as well. The world of crypto has kind of changed the way people invest. And I mean, where does Wahed sit with crypto investments in the whole blockchain space? I mean, obviously, there's huge opportunities with tech companies in there.
Yeah, I mean, so from a blockchain perspective in terms of technology, I mean, we're completely supportive of it. But because we only operate in the regulated space, bit of a mouthful there. At the moment, we wouldn't consider crypto as an asset class until it comes under some form of regulation. Because again, we're looking to protect the communities that we're trying to inform and serve. And so it would need more regulation for us to then officially consider it an asset class that we look at. But from a technology angle, for sure, I think it's phenomenal. And the interesting point actually is, Kenny, because look, why did Bitcoin catch people's imagination? Because it was seen as something that opposes the conventional, the established financial system. The whole attraction was decentralized finance. Suddenly there's a different way. There's a better way of banking and doing finance. And I think some of that discussion has been lost along the way because people have been riding the wave or being caught up in the furor around crypto. But actually, the fact that was a point at the beginning that kind of gave it its meteoric rise is something to look at. People were fed up with banking and finance the way it was, and they were looking for alternatives. And is crypto the answer, or is it a genuine alternative? I think some more work needs to be done in perhaps capitalizing on that to make it a genuine alternative and look at some of these other factors around, ESG and SDG and how it's being used so people don't suffer at the end of it.
Yeah, no, there's huge opportunities out there. And obviously myself and Mark, we speak to, there's a few companies. One in particular would be, for example, Mode PLC. And, they've set up their own digital banking company in the UK, and they're starting to get regulated. Mark, you know more about this company than me, so you do. They're regulated now as well, Mark,
aren't they? They're regulated, yeah. I think that's important for consumers to have that protection.
Yeah. So, no, it's interesting the way we're we're living. I mean, whether we like it or not, crypto's come into every part of our life,
Yeah.
and where we'll be doing everything on mobile phones, and whether it's a different user interface, we'll still be probably within the next 10 years interacting with crypto, whether we like it or not. I mean, both myself and Mark are, well, particularly myself, I'm quite heavily into crypto now. So
You're a crypto evangelist. Is that what they call it?
well,
Crypto
listen,
enthusiast.
I'm maybe scraping the bottom of the barrel. I'm not, but there is some good opportunities out there. So there is, but it's a wild west out there in the world of crypto.
Yeah.
So it is.
Mm. Agree.
Every day is a school day. So it is. And
yeah. But it's great. It's got great potential. This is the thing. And I think what's happened, we've seen a lot of disruptive finance come through. I think there's a general change with millennials. They don't have any hang-ups or an allegiance to huge brands. When I was kind of at university, my career path was you want to get into a big organization, get into a big investment bank. And, I don't hear that from younger people today. They want to do what they want to do. They're a lot more technologically savvy. They've been using computers since they were young. And so it's created this kind of disruptive age. And through that, there's going to be some winners and some losers. But it's good that, it's moving along. And the other part of that is that things are changing very quickly. Things are changing a lot quicker. The time span for change is a lot shorter now. And through crypto, definitely it's here to stay now. And it's a question of just navigating it in the best way possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I suppose crypto as well. I mean, there's a huge carbon footprint with some of the networks in particular. So that obviously would play on your mind if you were ever going to make an investment in this a regulated space. You would obviously need to assess their carbon footprint, and there was some horrific stats out there. I won't name the particular network, but it was something for every transaction it was like 50 or 60 kg or something. It was just it was just scary, and you see the amount of transactions going through a day.
Yeah,
it's just mad. So it is. But that kind of nicely brings us on to climate change, because I know you guys are sort of focused on climate change, and indeed you are attending COP26 next week.
Yeah.
So maybe tell us a bit about your investments in this sector, or what your approach is or strategy is in this sector.
Yes, absolutely. So I mean, look, from our kind of investment principles anyway, the fact that we look at sustainable companies from a sustainable finance perspective, these by nature also have an impact on the environment. I don't think people realize or appreciate sometimes the correlation between interest and financing and the environment, because when you consider this whole concept of future discounted value versus net current value, and interest being applied to companies, then they have to increase productivity to meet those payments. And what happens, it creates the rate of intensity around production, which then has a negative impact on the environment. You're having to produce a lot more in a lot less time just to manage financial payments. So there is one element from that side, but the other thing we're looking at, and we're actively investigating now, are companies who have a genuine environmental output that's positive. And this is difficult, to be very transparent with yourselves. It's actually difficult to find companies who are genuinely net neutral. A lot of the companies, what they do is just buy carbon credits and offset, which is wrong. But there are interesting spaces. There was one company that we were looking at potentially that does financing for black cabs. And the form of financing was on a profit share basis, but their requirement was that all the cabs had to be driven using cleaner fuel or green. So there are some interesting plays to be made, but it's about actually kind of cutting through what they're doing, and are they genuinely green, or is it just greenwashing? And it's not easy, to be honest, navigating this space. So we're trying to find those companies. We're looking to put in, they may have one factor which is good, but then 10 factors against them, if that makes sense. So we're actively looking. We're trying to use different indices to measure it. And then the plan is to then put them into the existing fund, or we're actually thinking about creating another separate fund that's optimized for ESG.
Interesting. Yeah, because obviously I'd mentioned I'm quite heavily into cryptocurrency, and one of the tokens I'm involved with, we're actually looking at kelp farming investing as well as a possible route for us. And the amount I've learned over the last couple of weeks about kelp farming and carbon offsets is just incredible. I mean, there is opportunities out there that you wouldn't even think existed. I mean, in the oceans after obviously fishing, kelp farming is the second biggest, or seaweed farming is the second biggest industry in the ocean, particularly. And I think Southeast Asia's probably got like 90% of the production. So there's opportunities in spaces you didn't even think existed. It's definitely worth exploring, and some of the potential returns are, they're beating the stock market hands down, or an index tracker hands down. And it ticks a lot of the ethical and investment boxes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are opportunities, but it's about kind of teasing them out.
Yeah. There's a lot of due diligence needs to go on, because a lot of them are still in their sort of infancy. A lot of these industries are still finding their feet and just finding their space in the sort of ecosystem, for want of a better term. But it's the last, like I say, the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've had a few Zoom calls and various people, and it's amazing what's going on. Especially, obviously, in the UK, we're surrounded by water, and it's amazing what's going on in this water, both good and bad. I may add, there's a lot of bad stuff going on as well. But all right, we'll move on to COP26 then. Uma, you guys are attending next week. Are you allowed to discuss in what capacity you guys are attending?
Yes, yeah. So I'm actually taking part in a panel session. I'll be hosting a session for the UN on the alignment between Islamic finance and sustainable development goals. That's one of the sessions that I'm doing. And the other session I'll be kind of taking part in is a fireside session with Lord Alderdice and Faith Invest around how to create a net zero economy. So yeah, both interesting discussions.
Yeah, well, like I said before we started recording, I'm kind of going as a +1. There's things you're saying that I like, and obviously there's a couple of things that I'm doing
good
in the crypto space that might be of interest. But
is this the largest event Scotland's held?
I would think, yeah, because I mean, we've had Commonwealth Games and stuff like that. It possibly is, probably this century, I would imagine. I can't really think of anything else that's dominated the news for so long. I mean, it's been the whole of this year. Everybody's been talking about COP26. So, no, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of it. Certainly, yeah, it's something to look forward to. You should be well looked after, and Glasgow's certainly get plenty of interesting eating places and drinking places as well. So, yeah, you might need a translating book for some of the locals. You might need subtitles or something, but I'm sure you'll be fine. But
maybe there's a business opportunity there. T-shirts with live subtitles as a person talking.
yeah. But well, I'm a Glaswegian. I was born in Glasgow originally, although I've not stayed there for a long time. So, but no, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. But
thank you.
So, sorry, Mark. I'll let you jump in.
Yeah. So, as well as doing the panels, Uma, are you heading to COP with an objective, with something you want to achieve, just talking about sort of finding opportunities and teasing opportunities out?
Absolutely. So looking to attend the main COP events during the week to just kind of see what else and what other people are doing in this space. I think it's always important that to kind of get inspired by other people. Sometimes leadership generally is a lonely place, whatever you're doing, whichever form of leadership it has. And then sometimes you can feel that perhaps you're the only ones working in a certain industry or having a certain mindset, and then going and finding other people who have similar views, who are working, struggling. It helps it from an inspirational perspective, but also opportunities in terms of collaborating, for collaborations. If there's anyone who's set up a fund, it'll be good to kind of see what they're doing, looking at perhaps investing in it and so on and so forth. And also just seeing other opportunities in terms of what people are doing in this space. And if there's anything we can help people with, I think it's important that, you can become very transactional when it comes to finance. And I think it's important that you take a step away from that. My life has always shown me that, look, if you look to create value, then the money will follow. Whereas if you try and seek the money, then you may get the money, but you may not end up creating any value. Whereas try and create the value, and then the finances, whatever, will follow. So I always find it's always good to speak to people, support other people in the area, give them encouragement, and wherever possible, if you can help. Indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I'm sure you're looking forward to it, and hopefully you and Kenny can indeed meet up. And I think the plan is to talk to you again shortly after the COP26, and we can catch up again and discuss some of the opportunities and people you spoke to while you're up there. And I think as well, it'd be nice to dive in a little bit deeper into some of the investments that Wahed do and the funds that you have, and also talk about who can sign up and how they can sign up and how really people can start on their investing journey, because it's certainly not as hard as it used to be. Anyone can really be an investor now, and it'd be nice to just explore, but make it really easy for people to understand what it is you do and how they can actually start getting involved.
Absolutely, it'll be an absolute pleasure to come back and feedback how COP was, and definitely could talk through why. It's so simple now. Buy a digital app. We're living in a digital age. It's really easy. A couple of minutes, couple of clicks, and you're online.
Indeed, yeah, indeed. Well, listen, thank you very much, Uma, for your time today. A bit of an insight there. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best at COP. And hopefully you and Kenny can meet in person.
Look forward to it, Kenny.
Yeah,
ready?
We'll have a chat after this. Yep, definitely, 100%.
Cheers. Great, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to another podcast from Market Musings with Ben and Russell. Tune in next time.